A TikToker named Kilmaru started uploading videos over 2 years ago, with his first video captioned, "I am very scared." In it, he's filming from his hotel window, looking out at a city street in broad daylight, and there's no one there. Then he walks outside. Restaurants, supermarkets, even a McDonald's, all stocked like normal, but it's completely silent. Since then, he's posted hundreds of videos from places that are normally crammed with tourists: the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the streets of London, amusement parks, the New York City subway, all empty. He claims that he's slipped into another dimension, an eerily empty alternate reality version of Earth. His followers throw him challenges, telling him to visit specific spots to prove he's really alone, but every time, it's just him on camera. One of the craziest updates came when someone told him to go to Berlin airport to try and escape. He says he fell asleep in the lounge, then woke up on a massive ship at sea. For 6 days he explored it before jumping into a lifeboat and making it back to land. And just like that, he was back to wandering through a perfectly normal looking world where he's apparently the only person alive. Now, of course, I don't know whether you believe in the alternate reality thing or not, but it is impressive that he's managed to film so many iconic locations with no one else in frame. I don't know if he just happens to find super specific times, maybe there's some editing trickery going on, but I think this is an interesting little art project aside from the mystery. Reddit user 17demon DICKS shared a creepy story with the heading, "I think I stepped into a parallel universe for a moment." They were about 18 or 19 at the time, still living in their childhood home. It was summer, early afternoon, and they were heading out for one of their usual walks to a nearby park. Something they'd done almost every day for years. They slipped on their shoes, opened the front door, and stepped outside, and instantly knew that something was off. Nothing looked different. The ravine next to the house, the tree in the yard, the driveway, the neighbors' homes, everything was exactly where it should be, but everything just felt inexplicably wrong. The Redditor said it was like reality itself had shifted in some subtle but deeply unsettling way. They stood there for a moment trying to shake off the feeling before heading down the driveway. About halfway down, they spotted their neighbor across the street tending to his garden. The neighbor looked up, froze. His face went completely pale, like he'd just seen a ghost. The neighbor slowly opened his mouth, about to say something with this look of terror on his face, but before the Redditor could respond, they were back inside the house, standing at the front door again, hand on the handle, about to step out. This time though, when they opened the door, the neighborhood felt completely normal again. The neighbor wasn't even outside anymore. Demon D's decided to skip the walk that day. Years later, they still can't explain the feeling. The thing that bothers them the most isn't even the sudden teleportation or the neighbor's terrified expression. It was indescribable wrongness, like they were looking at a completely different version of their own street. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were English academics who, in August of 1901, took a trip to the Palace of Versailles in France. After touring the main palace, they decided to walk through the gardens where Marie Antoinette used to hang out. They got lost and missed the turn from the main avenue, ending up on a quiet lane. Moberly noticed a woman shaking a white cloth out of the window, while Jourdain saw an old deserted farmhouse with a plow outside. That's when they started to notice this heavy, oppressive feeling wash over them. Moberly later described it as if, quote, everything suddenly looked unnatural, therefore unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry, end quote. Then they came across two men who looked like gardeners but wore long coats and three-cornered hats, very old-timey clothing, even for 1901. Close by, a man sat near a garden kiosk, his face covered in smallpox. As they finally crossed a bridge into the gardens, Moberly spotted a woman sketching on the grass. The lady wore a light summer dress and a white hat. Her hair was old-fashioned. Moberly thought she was a tourist at first, but later became convinced that what they'd both seen was Marie Antoinette herself. Neither mentioned what happened for a week, but after comparing notes and researching some of the history of the place, they believed they had somehow stepped back to August 10th of 1792, just weeks before the French monarchy was overthrown. The story blew up when they published it in 1911 under fake names in their book An Adventure in Years later, they found an old map that showed the bridge they said they crossed, and that bridge wasn't on any newer maps, cause it no longer existed. It hadn't for a long time. To this day, this is still one of the most famous and well-documented time slip stories in existence. Reddit user Albert Norman 2069 shared a wild story about what he thinks was a brief trip into an alternate timeline. He says it happened on June 28, 2014. His day started normally, waking up, brushing his teeth, eating breakfast, and getting in the car for work. But when he switched on the radio, things suddenly got strange. Instead of his usual music station, there was a news talk show playing. The host was talking about a recent victory in the Great War, praising troops in the military. At first, Albert figured it was just about the ongoing withdrawal from Afghanistan, but then the host started talking about a victory in Italy and how this win would finally end a second Great Depression. He was kind of confused, but figured it was just a radio play or something, so he just kind of brushed it all off. This wasn't the last he'd heard of this, though. Later during lunch, Albert overheard coworkers chatting about that same victory in Italy and something about preserving unity. They also kept repeating the numbers 3313. Finally, he was like, all right, what's going on here? So he asked, what the hell they were talking about, and they looked at him all offended and basically told him that his question was disrespectful to the troops. That's when Albert noticed a coworker named Sam was missing. But disturbingly, when he asked about him, nobody seemed to know who Sam was at all. On his way home, Albert took a different route through the city, and things just got more unsettling. He noticed there were these banners celebrating the victory, showing Marines landing on a foreign beach. The city also looked way poorer than he remembered. There were abandoned storefronts. Some buildings actually looked like they were crumbling. At home, he turned on CNN, and the anchors were discussing how American forces had defeated Italian logistical targets with minimal civilian casualties, how insurgencies in Greece and Ireland were winding down. At this point, Albert was kind of getting terrified. He had no idea what was going on. Was he losing his mind? Was this a bad dream? Well, he did what anyone would do. He went straight to Wikipedia. That's when he found a detailed page about a war he'd never heard of. It said Europe had collapsed into a civil war with Greece and Ireland occupied by coalition forces facing nationalist insurgencies, that the US was deep in a depression, and the global financial system was in chaos. Albert took screenshots of the pages. After he woke up, those pictures were still on his phone. Yes, he shared them on a Reddit post. This experience led him to wonder about parallel universes, pointing to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The idea that every decision creates a split, a different timeline. So Albert thinks somehow, just for a day, he slipped into one of those darker alternate realities. 6 years ago, Reddit user Peeny Bino shared a pretty unsettling experience. She was driving to work, stopped in a left turn lane when a car pulled up behind her. Out of nowhere, this intense cold fear hit her. It was like she just knew the car was going to crash into them. The car behind stopped gently a few yards back, but the fear didn't go away. Then things got even weirder. She felt this sudden jolt through her body, so strong it felt like the car actually moved with her. Checking the rear mirror, the other car was still there. The light turned green, and just before she took her foot off the brake, an excruciating pain exploded in her neck and head. She also noticed a strong smell and a taste of gasoline. It was overwhelming. She slowly rolled down the window, moved through the intersection, and gave an apologetic wave to the driver behind her. Pino Bino pulled into the office parking lot, trembling. The pain and gasoline smell, they eventually went away, but she was still shaken for the rest of the day. She even felt afraid to get back into the car at the end of the day. She called her fiancé, who joked, "Maybe you died in a car accident in an alternate universe and you felt it." Pino Bino just laughed that off at the time, but says she hasn't been able to shake that idea since. Years ago, a now deleted Reddit user shared a haunting story in an Ask Reddit thread about feeling a deep connection to someone they met in a dream. He explained that during his last semester at college, he was tackled by a massive football player, 325 pounds compared to his 120. He was unconscious for a little bit, but ended up being okay. He met an amazing woman, and after months of chasing her and dealing with a few jerk boyfriends, they ended up getting married. Soon after, they had a daughter. He had a good job, his wife stayed home to take care of the kid, and when their daughter was 2, they had a son. Life was almost picture perfect, but one day, while sitting on the couch, he noticed something off about a lamp in his room. Its perspective was inverted, like it was 3D, but just wrong. He couldn't look away, staying up all night staring at it. The next morning, he didn't go to work. Over the next few days, he stopped eating and barely left the couch, completely fixated on this lamp. His wife started getting worried. Called someone to talk to him, but he knew something was really wrong here. It was like his mind was unraveling. Eventually, he had an epiphany. That lamp wasn't real. Neither was his house, the wife, the kids, or the last 10 years of his life. That's when the lamp grew bigger in his vision, turning everything red while he heard screams and felt intense pain. And he suddenly woke up, lying on the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers. He was still on the ground, just having come back too from being tackled by the football player. In the brief time he'd been unconscious, he'd imagined an entire life. But it felt very real to him, too real. In his own words, "I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children, dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane, as I would cry myself to sleep hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says." This next story comes from Gunzo, who said he once dreamed he was driving home, listening to old music, when he spotted a badly damaged car on the side of the road. He stops, calls for help, and finds an unconscious young woman with short curly blonde hair inside. Drags her out, gives her first aid, until an ambulance arrives. When he glanced back at the woman though, she was suddenly wide awake and shocked, and that's when he woke up. Well, weeks go by, and his uncle gives him a family photo collage for his birthday. Among the pictures was his mom, young, pregnant at the time. She was also covered in scars. In fact, she looked exactly like the woman from his dream. When he told his dad about this, his dad said, well, a man rescued his mom after a car accident 25 years earlier, and then mysteriously vanished. Redditor this_IUS shared a strange story about his friend Gavin, who he said was incredibly smart, like higher IQ than anyone he knew. This happened when they were teens. One day, the Reddit user made an impromptu stop at Gavin's place. He knocked on the door and was shocked when a middle-aged man answered. It was not Gavin's dad. And things only got stranger. When he asked if Gavin was home, the man said, "I am Gavin." The man looked very confused. After some back and forth, the man was like, "Okay, yeah, he'll be back later." It seemed he just wanted to be left alone. Well, later, when the Redditor told Gavin about this, Gavin insisted no one else had been there, and he'd been home the whole time, too. This led to a theory. Had that middle-aged man actually been Gavin, a future version of him that had somehow briefly slipped back in time? In this classic piece of police dashcam footage, Officer Wayne Daniels is caught in a chase with this white car. The vehicle is weaving through traffic, making all these freaky, sporadic maneuvers, almost like the car itself is possessed. But aside from that, it's a pretty standard car chase until the vehicle makes a hard left and drives straight through a fence. Yes, through it. All Officer Wayne Daniels can do now is just watch as the vehicle he was pursuing fades into the distance, beyond the intact fence right in front of him. Spooky stuff. Next is another strange car video. This one comes out of Russia. So this vehicle goes to make a left-hand turn, and as it moves into the intersection, suddenly this random car just appears, cutting them off, nearly causing a collision. Now, on one hand, you have all this strange theories. Is it a ghost car? Did the vehicle just suddenly spawn out of a parallel reality? On the other hand, this driver could have just roared into the intersection so fast they weren't on camera until they just seemed to show up, and that is just reckless driving. And honestly, I think that freaks me out way more than some mysterious phantom car appearing out of nowhere. Well, if there's anything that looks like it materialized out of a parallel reality, it's this thing. This has become a pretty famous photograph in the UFO/UAP community. It's called the Calvin photo. It was actually hidden for decades. Some people say it's one of the clearest UFO images ever taken. The story goes that back in 1990, two hotel chefs were out on a casual hike in the Scottish Highlands near a place called Calvin. They were just out for some fresh air, nice view, and then boom, they spot this massive diamond-shaped object just hovering in the sky. That's when they managed to snap their picture. A real sharp picture as well. They sent it to a newspaper, but instead of publishing it, the paper passes it straight to the Ministry of Defense, and then the photo just disappears for over 30 years. Well, in 2022, a journalist named David Clark finally drags it out of hiding. Turns out a former Royal Air Force press officer had a copy stashed away this whole time. Clark gets a photo expert to analyze it, and guess what? There's no signs of tampering to the image. It is legit. So, what is this thing? Well, Clark thinks it's a real UFO. Not necessarily alien maybe, but definitely something unidentified. What you're looking at here is footage of what's been referred to as the Hessdalen lights in Norway. These things have been showing up since the 1930s, and no one's been able to fully explain what they are. It's these weird glowing orbs or flashes of light. They're seen floating or zooming around a valley. Sometimes they hover in one spot, other times they move around, fast or slow. They've been seen at night, in the daytime, and they've stuck around anywhere from a few minutes to several hours. Scientists have actually tried to study them too. There's been legit research, long-term observation. People have tried to explain it with stuff like ionizing gas clouds, rare atmospheric conditions, or reflections from aircraft lights, you know, all the standard science guesses, but none of them have ever definitively solve the mystery. Just what exactly is going on here? Well, it's called ball lightning. It's a rare, unexplained phenomenon, a glowing orb of electricity that floats around during a thunderstorm. Sometimes ball lightning will stick around for several seconds, even up to a minute. People have described it as anything from the size of a golf ball to a basketball, sometimes bright white, other times glowing blue or orange. It's weird, it's unpredictable, and it doesn't follow any of the normal rules. The craziest part is scientists still don't really know how it works. There are a bunch of theories floating around. Maybe it's plasma, maybe it's some kind of gas reacting with electrical charges, maybe it's something else entirely. No one's ever been able to make it happen in a lab. It just shows up randomly and then it's gone. That's probably why there are stories of ball lightning flying through closed windows or even damaging people's homes. It's like it just phases in from somewhere else and then disappears again like nothing ever happened. So yeah, could it be some rare natural thing we just don't get yet? Yeah, sure. Or maybe it's not just electricity at all. Maybe it's something slipping in from another dimension for a few seconds before vanishing back to wherever it came from. Did this TikToker briefly switch realities or experience a glitch in the Matrix? Jade Gonzalez, or as she goes by on TikTok, KDaddy777_2, she shared some security footage taken at the restaurant she works at. She'd been cutting lemons when something very strange happened. Take a look. So she slices through this lemon twice, once in half, and then she cuts through one of the halves. She goes to put the cut half in a bag, and then she's like, what? She inspects it for a little bit, only to realize it's not cut anymore, so she ends up having to recut it. Now, is it possible she just didn't slice all the way through the lemon? Yeah, but it didn't appear to be cut at all, at least according to her. Now, it looks to me like she sliced through that sucker. I mean, I see the separation, but then somehow it supposedly forms back together. Interestingly, some commenters mention a yellowish flash appearing around the lemon. One guy said, okay, with the brightness all the way up in my face an inch from my screen, I see two clear halves and a yellow-white flash, and it's suddenly whole again. I don't know, guys, we may have an interdimensional glitch lemon on our hands. This is Brady Feigl, and this is a guy named Brady Feigl. No, I did not just show two pictures of the same guy. Are they twins? Well, not technically. Are they brothers? Nope. Are they related at all? No. They're just two very similar looking men who happen to be named Brady Feigl, played minor league baseball around the same time, have an identical height of 6'4", and they each share exactly 53% Germanic ancestry. I mean, you know, just some minor coincidences. You know what I'm gonna say now? The fact that these two exist so closely to each other as well, it just feels like a glitch. I mean, if we really are living in a simulation, then this is a very clear case of someone running things who just got lazy and just copied and pasted these two guys with some very slight tweaks. And before, any know-it-alls in the comments are like, they don't look like twins, just stop. Stop, alright? They do, unequivocally. Identical twins? Maybe not. There are some clear differences in their faces, but they do look like they could be fraternal twins. Just admit it. So it's late at night and a trucker in Mexico is hauling cargo to Monterrey. Nothing weird, it's just another long drive until the company supervisor checks the truck's remote camera and sees something that makes his skin crawl. Sitting in the passenger seat is what looks like a woman. Pale, wearing old-fashioned clothes. Now, at first the supervisor just thinks the driver picked up a hitchhiker or something, which is totally against company policy, so he messages the driver, like, what's with the passenger? The driver is confused, and he just kind of thinks his boss is messing with him, so he keeps driving. But when he finally arrives at his destination, the supervisor shows him the dashcam footage. The driver freaks out, swearing up and down that he was alone the whole time. But clearly someone was caught on video sitting there next to him the entire trip. Now it'd be one thing if it was a woman in modern clothes sitting there chatting with the driver, but this wasn't really the case here. Something just seems off about this woman. A ghost? A weird glitch in the Matrix? Either way, you ask the driver and he'd probably tell you it was the creepiest thing he'd ever experienced on the road. What would you do if you were strolling through the park and came across this? 4 black cats, each one chilling on a separate bench. Not just randomly sprawled out either. I mean, 3 of them are sitting right on the edge of their benches, like they're part of some feline cult meeting, waiting for the 4th member to arrive. As for that last cat, well, it's still in motion, just hasn't figured out its assigned seating yet. This image was posted to Reddit titled Control-C, Control-V, so copy-paste, and yeah, it really does look like someone copy and pasted the same cat over and over. Now, black cats already get a bad rap thanks to superstitions, and seeing 4 of them lined up like some shadowy council of judgment doesn't exactly scream good vibes. I'm not even superstitious myself, but I don't even think I'd risk sitting on one of those benches. Alright, let's finish off the list with some science-y talk. So the universe is expanding faster than it should be, and scientists can't quite figure out why. That weird mystery is called the Hubble tension. Basically, we're getting different answers depending on how we measure the speed of the universe's expansion, and it's throwing everything off. To explain it, some researchers from the University of New Mexico and UC Davis have floated a theory that there could be a mirror world. Yes, a full-blown parallel universe made up of what are called shadow particles. Exact copies of the ones in our universe, but invisible, and only detectable through gravity. They're saying this hidden realm could be messing with how we perceive expansion, and might even be the source of dark matter, which is believed to make up most of the universe, but it isn't actually observable. This mirror world idea isn't totally new, but until recently it wasn't linked to solving the Hubble problem. Now scientists think it might be the missing piece that makes the math work. No one's saying that we've, confirmed the existence of parallel universes just yet, but if this turns out to be true, it could completely flip how we see the cosmos.
What if every doodle you made was actually a window into your future self? Since age 7, Alex has been idly sketching the same man's face, beard, top knot, shaven sides throughout school and college. For 3 decades, the image remained just a doodle, nothing like his own reflection. Then, a year ago, Alex rediscovered his old notebooks and froze. The face in those drawings was now his face, down to every whisker and hairstyle detail. He'd never changed his look to match the sketches, nor had he consciously remembered drawing them, yet here they were, trapped in time. Was Alex unknowingly crafting a portrait of his future self, or did the universe slip him a glimpse from a parallel life where this was already reality? What if your next-door neighbor never existed, except in your memories? In autumn 2012, Columbus nurse Danielle Miller pulled into her driveway and saw a moving van parked next to her longtime neighbor's home. She waved and yelled hello, but no one answered. When she asked around, other neighbors were baffled. There had been no resident there for over 10 years, and county property records showed the lot vacant since 2001. Danielle even found official tax bills listing the address as unassigned, yet her smartphone photos captured the moving truck, the name on its side, and the familiar porch of the house she'd known since childhood. In a single night, the entire residence and the person she'd shared block parties with vanished from every public record. Picture stepping onto a train that, according to every schedule shouldn't exist. In 1973, Boston commuter Mark Patterson regularly took the 7:45 p.m. line from South Station. One evening, bleary-eyed from working overtime, he boarded what he assumed was his usual train. 2 stops later, he glanced at the station sign and froze. It read Oldwick Junction, a station that shut down since the 1940s. Confused, Mark asked the conductor, who stared blankly and slapped his ticket. "All aboard for Oldwick," he said. When Mark disembarked at his apparent destination, the platform was bustling, but the schedule board listed no trains stopping there after dusk. Maintenance crews later confirmed the rails were decommissioned decades earlier. Mark's ride remains unexplained, leading him to wonder if he accidentally hopped into a parallel timelines commuter system. Think you remember every Sinbad movie? Think again. Ask anyone born in the late 80s if they saw Shazaam, the 1990s comedy where Sinbad plays a genie granting hilarious wishes, and 9 out of 10 people will swear it's real. I've seen this movie. They recall promotional tie-in toys, VHS covers with Sinbad's face, even commercials with that unforgettable theme song. Yet no studio records exist. No scripts, no posters in Viacom or 20th Century Archives. Sinbad himself has denied starring in any such film, and no footage has ever surfaced. This Mandela effect anomaly suggests millions briefly flit into a universe where Sinbad's genie movie actually existed, only to return claiming it never was. How did a single letter disappear from every bottle of Febreze overnight? For years, people swore they bought Febreze, an air freshener spelled Febreze. Then one day, retailers everywhere stocked Febreze, with just one E before the Z. Complaints flooded consumer forums. They changed the name without telling us. Yet corporate archives show it's always been Febreze with one E before the Z. Even longtime employees admit they remember the extra E. Was this a simple rebranding, or did millions of shoppers briefly slip into a parallel market where that second E never existed? What if a dream could order your real-world actions? College student Priya dreamed 3 nights in a row of her roommate Sarah handing her an envelope at 3:33 a.m., urging her to open it right away. The very next night at 3:33 a.m., Priya awoke to find a delivery slip tucked under her door. On impulse, she retrieved the package from the lobby. Inside was a sealed envelope labeled "Open at 3:33 tomorrow." Heart pounding, Priya obeyed and found a letter from Sarah warning Priya not to take a certain bus trip, citing a recent accident in the news. What was odd was that the next day, Priya had a trip planned on this exact bus, and in a dark twist of fate, that day and that exact ride Priya had booked did crash minutes after leaving. Priya swears she dreamwalked into information from a timeline where she'd heeded Sarah's warning days earlier. Have you ever looked at a building and seen something that couldn't belong there? Photographer Theo was snapping long exposure shots of downtown Chicago's skyline. He took 2 identical frames 10 seconds apart. Reviewing them later, he noticed in the first photo a gleaming glass tower that stood adjacent to the Sears Tower. In the second photo, same angle, same time, the tower was gone. When Theo rushed outside, the block looked unchanged. No extra skyscraper, no construction site. Neighbors had no memory of anything ever existing there. Records confirmed the plot was empty for decades. Theo insists his camera glimpsed a structure from another reality and that his lens just happened to catch its brief crossover. What if your doppelganger lives a life eerily parallel to yours, just miles away? In 2011, British IT consultant David Clark Googled his own name and found another David Clark living in Manchester with the same birthday, same middle name, and even the same job title at a rival tech firm. Intrigued, he reached out and discovered the other David had the same childhood nickname, had traveled to the same backpacking hostel in Thailand in 2005, and even shared a rare allergy to kiwi. Yet neither man had ever met or even knew of each other until that Google search. DNA testing confirmed that they weren't related. "It's looking like a mirror image of my life," David said. Was this an improbable coincidence, or did two parallel streams of Earth diverge, spawning twin lives in different locales? Have you ever walked into a library and checked out a book that shouldn't really exist? Librarian Maria Perez was reorganizing a decades-old archive when she stumbled on a title called The Eighth Sign of the Zodiac, published in 1978 by a local press. Curious, she tried to locate any record of the publisher or the author. Nothing. No ISBN, no reviews, no library listings anywhere else in the country. Even the author's name, Thomas Adler, turned up 0 hits. Maria flipped through the manuscript. It contained references to cultural phenomena that didn't exist until the 1990s, and when pressed, her library's old accession logs showed the book being cataloged in 1980, 2 years before anyone invented the ideas in its pages. Maria suspects the book slipped in from another timeline where those cultural milestones happened early. Could a single subway stop be the gateway to another world? New York City bus driver Ricardo Luna always ended his shift at the 23rd Street Depot. One night he took a shortcut through the subway tunnel and noticed a dimly lit station sign that read 23rd Street, but the platform looked brand new, with shiny white tile and digital display boards. Ricardo walked through expecting to find the main concourse, but emerged instead onto an entirely unfamiliar street corner. Phone maps showed him near 57th Street. Panicked, he retraced his steps only to arrive back at the usual, worn-out 23rd Street exit. The renovated station had vanished. Ricardo insists he stepped into a parallel version of the subway, if only for a minute.
When James Leininger was just 2 years old, he started having violent nightmares about crashing in a plane. He'd wake up screaming about being stuck in a fire or yelling things like airplane crash and the little man can't get out. During the day, he started naming aircraft parts most toddlers wouldn't know existed, things like drop tanks and Corsairs. He also kept saying he'd flown off a ship called the Natoma and that his name had been James. His parents eventually looked into it and discovered the USS Natoma Bay was a real World War II aircraft carrier. They found a pilot on its roster named James Huston Jr. who died in combat. The plane was shot down and exploded. James the toddler also named another pilot from that crew who was still alive at the time, and when they met, the child recognized him instantly. On top of that, James could recall specific events and details of battles that matched Navy records. His parents had never really talked to him about this stuff at home, and none of it was in any children's books. As he got older, the memories started to fade, but for a while, it seemed like this kid was actually remembering a past life. At 4 years old, Shanti Devi in India started insisting that she had another family in a different town. She told her parents she wasn't really their daughter, that her real name was Lugdi Devi, and she'd lived in Mathura, about 75 miles away. She said she died giving birth to a son and gave the full name of her husband, the town he lived in, what he looked like, and even the layout of their house. At first, everyone thought she was just making things up, but when they actually looked into it, her descriptions lined up. A man named Kedar Nath lived in Mathura, had a wife named Lugdi who died during childbirth, and had a son. When Shanti met him, she instantly recognized him and greeted him like she knew him. She also correctly pointed out places and people in towns she'd supposedly never seen. Word got around and the case became so well known that a commission was set up by order of Gandhi himself. They interviewed witnesses, retraced her claims, and found that almost everything she said had a real-world match. Cameron McCulley was a regular kid growing up in Glasgow, until around age 5 when he started talking non-stop about a place called the Isle of Barra. He claimed he used to live there in a white house by the sea with a black and white dog and a family that he really missed. He talked about planes landing on the beach, his old dad named Shane Robertson, and how his old life had ended when he, quote, fell through. His parents had never even mentioned Barra before, but Cameron was convinced. Eventually they took him to the island, and it turned out there really was a white house by the sea, just like he described. But I mean, whatever, right? A white house, it's not like there aren't any other white houses in the world. Well, this one belonged to a Robertson family. Again, just like young Cameron had described. Cameron was walking around like he'd been there before, naming things and pointing out details that lined up with what he'd talked about before. There were no obvious signs of how he could have known any of this. And his memories seemed emotional, not just factual. It didn't seem like he was just repeating stuff. It was as if he was genuinely grieving a life he'd left behind. In 1987, a little girl named Purnima Akaniak was born in Bakumana, Sri Lanka. She was like most kids, except for the fact that she kept talking about being crushed by a heap of iron. She'd also always tell her mother things like people who drive over others are bad, which is of course true, but it was odd that she seemed particularly focused on that specific thing, driving over someone. And when her mom got upset about a car accident that had happened one day, Purnima calmly told her not to worry because she had also died in a crash. She said a big vehicle hit her and she never made it to the hospital. Things got weirder when she started saying she used to make incense, and that her name had used to be Jinadasa. She also described 2 types of incense, how she made them, and how she used to walk around with her hands behind her back, supervising workers. She also claimed she lived across the river from a temple, which was over 140 miles away from her actual home. When her family finally took her there, she started pointing out familiar places and recognized people by name. And man she used to be, who'd died in a car accident, he was real. His name was Janandasa Pereira, and he died in 1985, 2 years before Purnima was born, when a bus ran him over while he was selling incense on his bike. And to top it off, she had a birthmark exactly where Pereira's chest had been crushed. Since childhood, Jenny Cockle would have recurring dreams of being a woman named Mary Sutton, who lived in Ireland, had several children, and died young in the 1930s. As she got older, Jenny became obsessed with finding out if Mary was real. She started piecing together what she remembered, names, locations, and the layout of Mary's old home. Eventually, she tracked down a town in Ireland that matched. She discovered that a woman named Mary Sutton had lived there and had died, leaving behind children. Jenny eventually reached out to them, now elderly, and met with them in person. And to their surprise, she knew all these intimate details about their lives, their personalities as kids, and even specific incidents from their childhood that had never been published or shared. One of the sons in particular became convinced that Jenny really was his mother reincarnated. He said she had the same mannerisms and emotional connection to them that Mary had. Imad Alawar was just under 2 years old when he started telling his parents about a life he had claimed to have lived in another village about 25 miles from where he was growing up, in Lebanon. He gave names, described a yellow car he used to own, and spoke about specific relatives, neighbors, and his former job. His family wasn't all that worried at first, but when Imad suddenly ran to a stranger on the street one day and hugged the man as if he recognized him, and it turned out this person was actually from the town Imad had claimed he'd lived in his past life, well, this intrigued his parents. Eventually, they contacted Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist who'd been studying cases of past life memories. Stevenson documented that Imad made 47 specific statements about his supposed past life. When Stevenson and the Elawar family visited the town, it turned out that 44 of those 47 statements matched up with the real-life story of a man named Ibrahim Bouncy, who died 5 years before Imad was born. Another important detail is that the child Imad would often talk about how thankful he was for being able to walk. Well, Ibrahim died around the age of 25 after spending a year in a sanatorium. He had tuberculosis and was confined to a bed during the final part of his life. Barbro Karlin was a Swedish writer and poet. When she was just 2 years old, though, she started telling her parents that she was Anne Frank. Her family wasn't religious, and she hadn't been taught anything about the Holocaust yet, but Barbro described details of Anne Frank's life that she shouldn't have known. What the secret annex looked like, how the rooms were arranged, and the names of the people who'd lived there. When her parents finally took her to Amsterdam at age 10, she led them straight to the building without a map or a guide. Once inside, she pointed out changes that had been made to the house since she had lived there. She also seemed terrified of men in uniforms, even if they were just policemen on the street. Barbo went on to become a well-known writer and stood by her memories well into adulthood. She said she remembered parts of her death, the fear of being taken, and a sense of injustice that followed her for years. Seme Tetsumus was born with a misshapen right ear, which his parents chalked up to a birth defect, but when he started talking, he claimed it was from being shot in the head in a past life. He'd said he'd been a man named Salim Fasli, a farmer from another village who'd been killed while working in his fields. He recognized people Salim had known, including his widow, and called her by name. He also gave names of Salim's kids and talked about private conversations and daily routines that no stranger would realistically know. Dr. Ian Stevenson, the same researcher who studied Imad Elawar, investigated Semi's case and found it pretty compelling. Salim had in fact been shot dead, and Semi's ear deformity was right where the bullet had entered. The way Semi talked about Salim's life was natural, like he was recalling memories instead of making things up. One of the eeriest parts was how Semi's personality was different from other kids in his village. He was more serious and cautious, traits Salim's family said matched the man that they had remembered. Chennai Chumale Wang was born in Thailand in 1967. When he was just 3 years old, he started saying he used to be a school teacher named Bua Kai. He claimed he'd been killed while riding his bicycle to work. His story got weirder when his family noticed he had two unusual birthmarks, one on the back of his head and another above his left eye. Well, Bua Kai was a real person who had died. And according to his autopsy report, the entry and exit wounds of the bullet that killed him matched up perfectly with Chennai's birthmarks. Chennai kept insisting he wanted to go home and would say the name of the village where he said he'd lived. Eventually, his grandma took him there, and without hesitation, he walked up to Bua Kai's old house. He correctly identified the man's parents and described items that had been in the home years earlier. He also remembered details like the name of Kai's bicycle and how he used to teach math. This case takes a turn from creepy to downright chilling. So a 3-year-old boy in Golan Heights, a region between Syria and Israel, started telling his family he'd been killed in a past life. He said he died when he was attacked with an axe and was buried in a nearby field. Elders in the community followed him to the spot, where they dug up a human skeleton with a wound in the skull, right where the boy said the axe had struck. Not only that, but the boy claimed to remember the name of his killer. When they confronted the man, he allegedly confessed. The whole thing was documented by Dr. Eli Lash, a respected physician known for his public health work. He said the boy's memories were disturbingly detailed, right down to the type of axe used. From Reddit user Flamingo comes an unsettling experience with an answering machine. Goes as follows. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me, kill all extremists. Sorry, I missed you. Call you later. Bye," and then hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he calls me back and he says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, there was a slight pause, and then it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so, with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I did not recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave. The two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but the talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that records the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and analyzed, unfortunately. Also, I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. Back in the summer of 1968, two teenagers working at a summer camp in Vermont, 16-year-old Michael Lapp and 19-year-old Janet Carnell, were just hanging out by the dock, watching the sun set over Lake Champlain. Most of the camp was empty because the kids were away at a swim meet. Pretty peaceful scene, but it didn't last. Michael spotted a weird light in the sky. At first he figured it was just a star, but then it suddenly dropped and started coming toward them. Soon, 3 smaller lights broke off from the main glow and started zigzagging over the water in ways no plane or helicopter could. The lights got closer, formed a triangle, and then one dove straight into the lake. Michael described the sound that followed like a, quote, 1,000 tuning forks, which is such an oddly specific comparison to make. Then he noticed a transparent dome on the craft, and inside were what he described as 2 childlike creatures with big heads, long necks, and huge eyes. The craft shot a beam at them, so Michael grabbed Janet and pulled her down as they felt themselves begin floating into the air. The next thing they knew, they were back sitting on the dock. But it was much later. Both were disoriented, and Janet seemed almost in a trance. Years later, Michael started having recurring nightmares, always about being taken. He recalled being inside the ship, seeing Janet examined, looking up through the dome at Earth and the stars. Janet later recalled the event, describing it almost exactly as Michael had, only she hadn't spoken to him in years. Researcher Walter Webb eventually concluded that the two had, quote, no opportunity for collusion, and that they'd experienced a, quote, real external event of unknown origin. Reddit user MissPack01 had a very odd experience with a school assignment. They write, I'm going to college in British Columbia, Canada, and I'm taking a business class. So first week of February, our teacher talks about an assignment that'll be due March 2nd. It's a 3-page paper with references on something we've learned in the class. That night he posts a little thing about due date, and expectation, and formatting, blah blah blah. I start the paper early to get it out of the way, but of course, life and work get in the way, so I forget about it for a week. Fast forward to yesterday's class and I start freaking out about the assignment. I go to my folder on the computer and it's not there for some reason. Oh no, maybe I forgot to save. Unlikely, but possibly. So when I get to class, I ask him if he wants it submitted online, because I didn't see a Dropbox, or handed in physically on Monday. Here's where it gets weird. He doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about. Says there never was any assignment. I got him to look on the course site where he posted the outline and nothing was there. I asked a couple classmates and nobody had a clue what I was talking about either. This is so weird. I'm only taking 2 classes as I work full time, so no, I did not get the assignment mixed with another class. In the last month, did I somehow walk through a door to another universe? Well, I can't tell you for sure, Redditor, but if I switched to a parallel universe that meant everything stayed normal, but I no longer had homework due, I would count that as a win. This one comes from a Redditor named Carla Ray 14, and if the title of the post, I'm convinced my parallel universe self was speaking to my family, doesn't creep you out already, then just listen to this. So about 5 years before she made the post, Carla's parents and 2 sisters were traveling around Europe. She stayed home with her husband and their baby. Well, one night at 3 a.m. her phone starts ringing. It's her dad. She ignores it at first, thinking maybe he forgot about the time difference, but then it rings again and again. When she finally checks her phone, she sees a dozen missed calls and a pile of messages from her family, all saying things like, everything will be okay, we're going to get the next flight home to be with you, stay strong, we love you. Completely freaked out, she answers the next call and demands to know what's going on. Her dad, sounding really shaken, tells her, I've just been on the phone with you for an hour. What do you mean, what's going on? He insists that she called him in tears, saying her husband left her after she told him she was pregnant. Carla's husband was literally asleep beside her though. She says, Dad, what are you talking about? He's right here. He hasn't walked out on me, and I'm definitely not pregnant. Her family swore it was her voice on the line though. Even her sister said she talked with Carla during the call, heard a friend in the background, and got details like Carla canceling her dentist appointment. Something that was actually true, but only her husband knew about. Carla had to send a photo of her and her husband right then and there to prove that nothing happened. And to this day, her dad just shakes his head and says, I don't know what to believe. Is it possible someone was just making a prank call? I mean, I guess maybe, but they guessed a lot of specific details if that's the case. Is it also possible that some version of Carla from a parallel universe managed to call her dad in this one? I don't know. What do you guys think? This one comes out of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, back in September 1st of 1969. That night, dozens of people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky over Sheffield. Some described them as being attached to a disc-shaped craft, and even stranger, a lot of witnesses said they couldn't account for chunks of time after watching it. It wasn't just like, I saw lights and went home. People felt like something really happened to them. One of the most talked about witnesses is Thomas Reed. He was only 9 at the time, riding in a car with his mom, brother, and grandmother. He said they first saw glowing orbs shoot out from the trees along the road. When they got near the Sheffield Bridge, things got even weirder. It came to a stop off the right side of the road. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was like a barometric change in pressure. It was just like a dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it, end quote. Next thing they knew, they were back in the car, but 2 hours had passed. His mom and grandmother had even switched seats, and no one could explain how. Reed later said they regained flashes of memory about being inside some massive hangar with curved hallways, and other people were there too. As for where they were, who the hell knows? This next story was shared by a now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. Okay, I don't really know how to explain this without sounding insane, but I've been thinking about it for years and I still can't make sense of it. Back in 2016, I was driving home from my job around 2 a.m. I live in a small town, so the roads are usually dead quiet at that time. There's one stretch of highway I always take that goes past a gas station, then about a 15-minute straight before I hit my exit. Well, this time though, something was off. I passed the gas station like usual, but when I looked at the digital clock in my car, it said 2:17. I swear it had been 2:04 the last time I checked. Right as I passed the station, that stretch of road normally takes 15 minutes, but somehow it felt like it just skipped. I don't remember zoning out, I don't remember seeing anything weird. It was just like the time jumped forward and I was closer to home than I should have been. The creepier part is the gas station itself. For a couple months after that, whenever I drove by it, the lights were off. The pumps were wrapped in yellow tape and the sign was taken down. When I asked a coworker about it, they told me that gas station has been shut down for years, but I know I stopped there plenty of times and I definitely remember seeing it open that night. I don't have proof, I know it sounds like bad memory or whatever, but I can't shake the feeling that I've somehow crossed into a place where things aren't exactly the same. On October 11th, 1973, 2 guys from Mississippi, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson, went out night fishing in the Pascagoula River. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but then Parker noticed blue lights hitting the water. At first he figured it was the cops telling them to pack it up, but what came next was nothing close to that. A big light came out of the clouds. Parker later said it was a blinding light. It was hard to tell with the lights so bright, but it looked like it was shaped like a football, about 80 foot. It made a very loud sound. It was just a hissing noise, end quote. Then 3 strange floating creatures came out of the craft. They didn't have legs, and Parker said they had mitten-shaped claws. One was gray and didn't have a neck. Another looked more feminine. When one of them reached for Parker, instead of panicking, he suddenly felt calm. I think they injected us with something to calm us. I was kind of numb and went along with the program, he said. Both men claimed they were pulled aboard the craft and examined. Hickson remembered. There were no seats, no chain. They just moved me around and I couldn't resist them. I just floated, felt no sensation, no pain. He also described a giant eye-like machine scanning them. He reported everything to the sheriff that night, and deputies secretly recorded them afterward, expecting them to slip up. Instead, they caught the men whispering in fear. Jesus Christ, God have mercy, they had us. They could have done anything to us, Hickson said. For decades, Parker stayed mostly quiet, only writing a book in 2018 after Hickson's death, and that's when other locals came forward saying they saw something strange in the sky that very same night. In 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Vilas Boas claimed he was abducted by aliens. Working late in his fields to avoid the heat, he said he saw a red star approaching, which turned out to be an egg-shaped craft with a rotating red light. Boas alleged that 5-foot-tall beings in gray overalls and helmets captured him and took him aboard, where he was subjected to blood tests and a strange gas that made him violently ill. He also claimed a female alien engaged with him intimately and indicated she would raise their child in space. 4 hours later, he was released and watched as the craft just flew back up into the sky. A lot of people obviously dismissed his story, but a man named Dr. Olavo Fontes noted Boas had burns, bruising, and nausea. Boas later became a lawyer, but he never shook this incident. He'd often craft models of the UFO he claimed to have seen, and he stuck to his story till his death in 1991. What you're looking at here is obviously police inspecting a crashed car, but this was no normal car. This is known as the Suriri ghost car case. On December 11th of 2002, multiple calls came into the police about a car swerving off the road and crashing into a ditch near an exit ramp in Surrey, England. Police show up, expecting to find a fresh crash and maybe help a driver in trouble, but they find something stranger. At first, the officers don't see anything unusual. It's just another crash site, but as they get closer, they spot this old, overgrown vehicle. And they do find the driver, but he's no longer alive, and hadn't been for a long time. And I don't mean hours, I mean months. It was the body of a man named Christopher Brian Chandler. He'd been missing for months. Based on the state of the car and the body, the police quickly determined the crash had happened 5 months earlier, back in July of the same year. Christopher's family confirmed that he had been missing since then. So the question was, what were people actually seeing on that cold December night when they phoned the police? There were no other accidents to be found. Some people believe they were seeing a sort of ghost car, a glimpse into another reality. Could it have been a time slip where the crash from the past somehow overlapped with the present moment? Some people think the reports of a crash were from a parallel universe or timeline, and the car appeared in real time for just a brief moment before disappearing. No one really knows for sure, and we'll probably never get the full answer, but it's a perfect example of how strange the world can be, and that maybe there's more going on than we can ever hope to understand. Now, what you're looking at here is known as a cold spot, deep out in space. Back in 2004, astronomers detected an anomaly in the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. This cold spot is noticeably cooler than its surroundings, spanning approximately 1.8 billion light years. At first, scientists attributed this to a vast, empty supervoid, a massive region with fewer galaxies, but studying it further using more precise measurements, there's some doubt about that explanation, suggesting the void might not be as large or as empty as they thought. Well, so what does this mean though? Well, the discrepancy has led some researchers to wonder if the so-called cold spot could be the result of our universe colliding with another universe during the early stages of cosmic inflation. A collision like that could have left an imprint in the CMB, giving us possible evidence for the existence of parallel universes. This is the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA for short. It's a NASA-funded experiment designed to detect high-energy cosmic neutrinos by capturing radio waves emitted when these particles interact with the Antarctic ice sheet. During its flights, Anita spotted several events where particles appeared to be traveling upward through the Earth instead of coming down from up in space. Scientists were very confused because that's not supposed to happen. Particles like neutrinos had never been seen passing through the Earth like that. Well, one hypothesis is that these anomalies could be explained by the existence of a parallel universe where the laws of physics, including the direction of time, are reversed. In this scenario, particles originating from a mirror universe could travel upward through our planet. In 2019, scientists dropped what looked like a blurry orange donut onto the internet and basically broke science Twitter for a week. What people were seeing was the first real photographic evidence of a black hole, snapped by the Event Horizon Telescope. Now, what we're looking at isn't the black hole itself, technically, because physics just won't let us actually see the thing. What it is the glowing gas and light bending around the edges of the black hole. That ring is the Event Horizon, a one-way ticket to nowhere. Or maybe somewhere else. See, theoretical physicists like Nikodem Pawlowski think that black holes might not just absorb stuff into nothingness, but may instead be gateways to other universes. His theory says when matter collapses into a black hole, it might not get crushed out of existence, but instead get funneled into an entirely new universe on the other side. Like, imagine every black hole being the Big Bang for a different reality. It's all based on some deep theoretical physics. No one can prove it yet, but it does fit in with the idea about multiverses and bouncing universes instead of just one big beginning. So yeah, maybe this blurry space donut isn't just a hole, maybe it's a door. What you're looking at here is a piece of what's called Kirlian photography. Back in the late 1930s, a guy named Simon Kirlian figured out that if you zap something with a high voltage current and take a picture of it, you get these weird glowing outlines around the object. Plants, apples, people's fingers, suddenly they all looked like they had some kind of electric aura around them. It was like photographing life energy, or maybe something from some other reality bleeding into ours. Now, people still argue about what this actually shows. Some say it's just moisture or static or whatever. Cool, noted. But we're here to talk about the weird and unexplained. So others think this glow is something deeper, a glimpse into another layer of existence, something we can't see with our eyes, but might be there all the time, kind of like the Force. Some even claim these energy fields shift with your mood or health, and if you believe the more far-out theories, you're literally watching energy from another dimension react in real time. No one's ever managed to fully explain it, but the fact that a basic electrical rig might be snapping pics of alternate layers of reality, that's the kind of stuff that does keep you up at 3 a.m. scrolling deeper and deeper into the weirder parts of the internet. Back in 2007, a security camera at the courthouse in Santa Fe caught something weird early in the morning around 7 a.m. On the footage, there's this glowing white thing, kind of round, kind of shapeless too, just drifting across the frame. It wasn't fast or anything, just sort of floating there. People online immediately started calling it a ghost. Obviously, I mean, what else are people gonna say? Well, some said it looked more like something out of phase with reality, like we were seeing a bleed through from somewhere else entirely. The way it moves doesn't look like a reflection or a glitch. It looks like it's there, just not in the way anything else usually is. Of course, the official explanation was that it was a bug walking across the lens, and sure, it could be that, but what do you think? Does it really look like a bug? People in different parts of the world have filmed what looks like two suns in the sky at the same time. One bright sun and then a second one that looks slightly smaller but still glowing like a legit celestial body. Naturally, a lot of people are pretty confused about this. Some folks say it's just a lens flare. Others say that nope, that was actually in the sky. So scientists have looked into it, like Jim Kaler, an astronomer from the University of Illinois, who says it's probably some kind of atmospheric optical illusion, light bending in weird ways because of moisture or temperature layers in the air, but even he is not 100% sure what the hell's going on. Mirages usually stack vertically, like one image above the other. This double sun thing is side by side, which makes a little less sense, so no one knows exactly what causes it. Grant Perry, another scientist, flat out said this is not a common optical phenomenon. So yeah, maybe it's just a weird trick of the light, or maybe we're seeing something that we can't even begin to comprehend. So this one is pretty wild. There's a CCTV clip that's become pretty well known for how downright bizarre it is. A guy is walking down the street at night. A second man enters the frame in front of him, at which point the first guy does something super weird. The guy in the back taps the dude in the front on the shoulder right as a car whizzes by and a metal object swings out as the guy in front is about to get swatted with it. If it weren't for the tap, he would have been hit, no question. The guy who does the tapping seems completely unfazed though. He's not panicking, doesn't even look back to check if the car's about to hit him. How did he know what was about to happen? It's also strange because he doesn't even say anything. Doesn't stick around to be like, oh damn, wasn't that nuts? Almost like he knew exactly what was going to happen and was just doing his part to stop it. And then he's out. Naturally, the internet lost its mind with theories. The most popular one, the guy giving the warning is a time traveler. Maybe he's from the future, maybe a version of the guy in front of him from a different reality, trying to make sure his past self doesn't die in a freak accident. Could this be a huge coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. So this is some straight up NPC behavior, except in real life. So a guy in Omsk, Russia wakes up one morning and can't find his flock of sheep. Usually he expects to find them right where he left them, but not today. He goes out looking for them and to his surprise finds the entire flock of sheep standing on top of a roof. Now there's no obvious way for these sheep to get up there, no secret sheep elevator that we know of anyway. The man assumed they'd somehow gotten spooked by something and just climbed up the roof. How the hell do a bunch of sheep get up there without making a noise or causing a ruckus? It's like they just teleported to the top, like an NPC glitch in a video game randomly appearing on a roof. Next we have space orcs. Orcs standing for odd radio circles. So what are these? Well, they're actually what the name suggests, massive circular blobs in space that show up in radio telescope images. And no one really knows what they are. They were first discovered in 2020 when astronomers were mapping the sky using Australia's ASCAP radio telescope. These huge rings appeared out of nowhere, perfectly circular, massive in size, and didn't match anything scientists had seen before. They aren't galaxies, stars, supernova remnants, or anything that usually pops up in space surveys. Some scientists think they might be the result of huge explosions or collisions far, far away, cosmic shock waves that left behind radio footprints we're just now seeing. But others think they could have something to do with galaxies which have active black holes at their centers. And then there's the more exciting possibility that orcs might be a sign of something completely new, some sort of phenomenon we just don't have a name for yet. Point is, for as much as we think we know, the world is a highly mysterious place.
What would you do if you saw yourself walking out the door while you were still sitting at your desk? A Reddit user named Trigger Happy Greg, which we'll talk about that later, worked night shifts at a small call center. One evening around 2 a.m., his coworker looked up and said, "Didn't you just leave?" Confused, Greg replied, "What are you talking about? I've been sitting here." The coworker swore she saw Greg walk past her office and out the front door. Same hoodie, same walk, same everything. They even checked the security camera, and sure enough, there was Greg walking out. But Greg had never left, and the security footage glitched right as he hit the parking lot. Erased, like someone never meant for him to be seen. Imagine someone who looks exactly like you calling your dog by name and walking down your street like they live your life. A woman from Oregon shared a chilling story on a paranormal Facebook group. Her neighbor knocked on her door one evening, confused, and asked, "Why didn't you say hi earlier? I saw you walking Max." Only this woman had been inside all day. Max, her golden retriever, hadn't left the house. The neighbor was adamant, said she even waved and the woman waved back. Creeped out, she checked her doorbell cam and saw someone with her exact face walking Max past the house. But conveniently, the footage froze just as the double turned to look at the camera. What if you called your own phone and someone answered? A man named Alex recounted this story about parallel universes. While looking for his missing phone, he used his partner's device to call it, and someone picked up. The voice on the other end said hello, but it was his voice. The same tone, same speech pattern. The voice said, "Don't come looking for me," and hung up. Later, Alex found his phone under the couch, completely dead. There was no missed calls, no records of an incoming call. It was as if whoever answered was using a different version of his phone. What if someone knocked at your door and you answered while you were still upstairs? This story comes from a Reddit user named Mirror Moments, who shared an experience from when she was a teenager. One afternoon, she was upstairs in her bedroom when her friend came over and rang the doorbell. Her mom wasn't home, so no one should have answered, but her friend said that someone did, and it was her. The other her opened the door, smiled, and said, "I'm busy, come back later," before shutting it quietly. The friend was so weirded out by the interaction that she texted her asking what was going on. That's when Mirror Moments ran downstairs in confusion, only to find the door still locked. Her friend was standing outside, pale and wide-eyed. She swore that it was her. The same hoodie, the same voice, the same smirk. It was her friend. She knows what her friend looks like. When they checked the security cam footage later, it glitched right at the time the door supposedly opened. No motion, no video, just static, almost like something or someone didn't want to be seen. Someone showed up at your house claiming to be you, and your family believed them. Redditor Pale Orange Sky posted that her younger sister swore she'd picked her up from school one day, drove her home, and even helped with her homework. The problem? Well, she was working a double shift that day. Her car was parked at her job, and she had proof. Time cards and surveillance. But her sister described the car perfectly, described her outfit, described conversations they'd supposedly had. Quote, "You told me to stay away from the old tree in the backyard," her sister said. Only she'd never said that before. Or at least, not in this universe. What's up with that old tree? I want to know why the parallel universe version was so concerned about the tree. Something mysterious. You get home and the door's unlocked. Someone's in the shower. It's you. A man named James from Missouri told his story to a paranormal podcast. He came home after a weekend trip and heard the water running. He assumed his roommate was home early, but when he opened the bathroom door, he froze. Why would he open the door when he thinks his roommate is in the shower? It's a creepy roommate. Anyways, the person in the shower had his tattoo, his build, his voice. They both screamed. The other James bolted through the back door and then vanished. When he told his roommate later, the roommate casually said, "Dude, I thought you were already here. I talked to you like an hour ago." What if one day everyone acted like you weren't you? In 2016, a woman named Marissa shared an incident in a thread about identity glitches. She walked into work and nobody recognized her. Her boss claimed they'd already spoken that morning. Her coffee was already at her desk. Someone had clocked in with her badge 20 minutes earlier. She checked the security footage and saw a woman who looked exactly like her, wearing the same clothes, walking into the office and doing everything that she normally did. The footage froze as the real Marissa walked in. Her double was never seen leaving. When your reflection moves before you do, run. A man in the UK posted on a lucid dreaming subreddit that he was brushing his teeth one morning when he noticed something was off. His reflection wasn't synced. It blinked a little too early, tilted its head before he did, and then it smiled. And he hadn't smiled. He turned around and ran out of the bathroom, nearly slipping. When he went back later, everything looked normal, except for one thing. The toothpaste cap was off, but he remembered screwing it back on. I guess the reflection didn't. Someone showed up at the DMV pretending to be you. Honestly, that's not so bad. They can wait in line for me. That's totally fine. In 2019, a man named Eric from Pennsylvania went to renew his passport and was told, "We already issued it yesterday." Confused, he checked, and sure enough, someone with his name, birth date, and even address had already picked it up. He asked for the security footage and saw someone who looked exactly like him down to a scar on his cheek, but Eric had been at work, logged into his company computer at the time. He reported it, but authorities never found the impostor or the passport. That's like crazy to think that your parallel universe doppelganger could come here and steal your identity. Would it even be a crime? I mean, technically, they are you. Sorry, I'm just like really having a moment. Like, guys, let's think about that for a second. Would they be jailed if they caught them? Let's say, yeah, they caught them. Would they be jailed for trying to steal your identity, even though it technically is their identity too? I don't know. Let me know down below. What if you met your double and they acted like you were the intruder? One of the most disturbing stories comes from a woman in Australia who shared her experience on a podcast called Somewhere Else. While staying at an Airbnb, she swore she saw someone walking into the living room from the hallway. A woman with her exact face and clothes. They locked eyes. The other version of her whispered, "You're not supposed to be here," and then apparently just disappeared into thin air. She packed up and left that night. When she checked the Airbnb listing later, it had been removed. No record of the host, no record of her stay. Even her confirmation email was gone. Doppelganger stories aren't just eerie. They challenge everything we think we know about identity, time, and maybe even reality itself. Whether they're signs of a multiverse, glitches in our simulation, or something stranger entirely, one thing's for sure, these stories are more than just spooky coincidences. They're warnings.